So we're making here a raspberry cheesecake. We're going to start off by making a hobnob base. So the base in the bottom and then the filling on the top. So this is a hobnob version, which is delicious. You could change this up and do a shortbread or a shortcake base. You could also do potentially a square of sponge in the bottom. And you could also add things like crystallized ginger or perhaps demerara sugar instead of the soft brown sugar. We're going to make this a bit like a pastry. We're going to chill it and then we're going to roll it out into the bottom of the tin, bake it at 180 degrees for about 15 minutes, allow it to cool before we put the filling on the top. So we've got a loose bottom square tin, can be any shape you want actually. We've got some softened butter in a bowl with the brown sugar. We're going to cream this first of all to get it nice and light and fluffy. And then we're going to add jumbo oats, wholemeal flour, bicarbonate of soda and baking powder, and then a very generous amount of sea salt as well, so you get that lovely saltiness. We've also got the addition of some golden syrup. This one has a maple flavour to it. So the first job then is to cream this until it's really fluffy and aerated. If the butter's a little bit hard, you might just want to start off without it running, just so it doesn't jump around too much. So this will take 3 or 4 minutes. So having creamed the butter and sugar, we're going to add the golden syrup. Just use your scales here just to weigh it directly into the bowl. It's about 2 tablespoons. And we're just going to cream that one more time with the electric whisk before adding the dry ingredients. So you can just remove all of the butter from the whisk itself. You'll need all of the butter because there's quite a bit of dry ingredients here to mop up. So jumbo oats, wholemeal flour, raising agent, bicarb and also baking powder and sea salt. It's going to be a fairly dry mixture this. So you can make really delicious biscuits with this mixture. So roll it into a cylinder, refrigerate it, cut them into discs and bake them. But it also makes a fantastic base for the cheesecake as well. So some crystallized ginger in here would be lovely. Perhaps even some cocoa nibs. So just towards the end here, no harm in just getting your hand in there. Just use the warmth of your hand just to bring it together. Because of the amount that this has been mixed, it definitely needs to be chilled. So once you've formed a lump, just wrap it and refrigerate it for a good 15 minutes or longer. So there we go. That's the hobnob dough. So it's time to line the base of our cheesecake with the hobnob biscuit. We've got a little disc of paper in the bottom, and this has been refrigerated for about 30 minutes. So in fact, we don't need the entire quantity. We're going to measure off 150 grams. So a nice thin base to the cheesecake. And with the remaining biscuit, as I say, you can roll this into a cylinder, cut it into discs, and then bake it as biscuits. So we've got 170 there. A really nice cross section here, all the oats. There we go. So often is the case with something like this, and also with, say, an oat cake, it's quite difficult to roll. So the tip here is to roll it between parchment paper. Just make sure it's approximately in the shape to start with that you want it. Okay, so something with corners. So as I say, this is the tip. You know, if you've got something that's quite fragile and you want to roll it, rather than putting flour on the table, it's much better to roll it between parchment paper. So if we reveal the paper, you can see we're getting close. What we might do is just trim off those edge bits and just add them to the corners. So this cheesecake is, you know, a very popular, commonly made thing, but actually we're looking for quite a bit of refinement here. So having a thick base would be unrefined. Okay, so we want a nice, thin, crunchy, textured base. There we go, that's going to be fine. So with the loose bottom tin, just remove firstly the paper and then the bottom. Just pop it straight in. Just push it into the sides of the tin and then just carefully remove the paper. So this method ensures that you've got a lovely thin base. If you have any pieces just up on the side of the tin, just trim those away. Just use a floured finger just to make sure it's completely lined. And equally, if you have any small gaps, just plug them with an extra piece. Okay, so there we go. We've got the biscuit in the base, nice and neat, really thin, and that's ready to bake in the oven, 180 degrees for 15 minutes. Okay, so we're going to finish the cheesecake, set it in the fridge, and then put a jelly on top tomorrow before slicing. So the Hobnob base has been cooked and cooled, slightly browned, which is great. Had about 12 minutes in the oven, and that's ready for a cold filling on the top. So the filling itself is quite straightforward. The first thing you want to do actually is just heat up some water to melt the gelatine, and we're using leaf gelatine, which is potentially much easier than the powdered gelatine. So roll it up and soak this in cold water. So the next item is to flavour and then sweeten the cream cheese. So today we're using a vanilla bean paste, okay, which is quite strong, but this is one of the dominant flavours in this dessert, so it can be fairly bold. Also some icing sugar. So it's worth just sieving that through. It can often be a little bit lumpy. And I'm going to use just a balloon whisk, but you can do this in a freestanding mixer or with an electric hand whisk. There is a risk actually that you can overwork this, particularly when the double cream is in here, and overworking it would appear grainy. So if it's a small quantity or a single quantity like this, my preference is to do it by hand. So it just needs incorporating like this. The next thing is to just see whether the gelatine is soft enough, and it is. And the way to incorporate the gelatine into a dessert like this is just to take a little bit of hot water, got a little bit too much there, just a tablespoon of water that's come to the boil and then taken off the boil. If you boil the gelatine, it will actually weaken the setting property, but equally it needs to be sufficiently hot to melt it. So just dissolve it in there. There it is. And make sure you scrape out the pan to include all of it. You want to mix that through fairly quickly because it will obviously set against a cold ingredient fairly quickly. So the addition of gelatine allows us to actually slice this into a really attractive, quite refined looking dessert. that's why it's there. We're then going to enrich this with cream, so quite a bit of cream. And as I say, we're going to put a raspberry jelly on the top, but there's no reason why you couldn't add the addition of a fruit puree to this. So you could marble it through, stir through a mango or a raspberry puree. So this is the stage where you can over mix this. When you add the double cream, you don't want to allow the mixture to go grainy at all. It's worth just having a quick taste. Just to make sure you haven't accidentally added salt or anything like that. And then we're going to go into a piping bag. So a piping bag is the best way to get this neatly into the tin. So we're back to the cheesecake. This has been setting in the fridge overnight, but for at least 3 or 4 hours, so it's nice and cold. We've got our raspberry jelly here, which is on the point of setting, so you need to work quite quickly with this. So position your cheesecake on a tray or a board, ready to transport to the fridge, or ideally actually keep the cheesecake in the fridge and take the jelly to the cheesecake. So pour the jelly straight onto the top. It needs to be fluid enough to find its own level, which this is just perfect. But it doesn't take long for it to go too far. So this is reliant on that cream filling being completely level. All right, so you get a lovely layer of jelly on the top. That's looking really good. So if you do have any bubbles, just use a cocktail stick or a skewer just to remove the bubbles. So just a small amount of jelly here. It's going to take a couple of hours to set, and then it will be ready for slicing and serving.